Thank you everybody for joining me. We've got 29 people, which is great. Last time I did this, I think we had about 10. So this is lovely to have so many of you join me on this Friday afternoon. Thank you for taking the time. Hopefully you've got a cup of tea, coffee, something to nibble on as we go through. We've got an hour today, and we'll use that if we need to. If not, we'll finish a bit early. I'm easy. Um, what I'd like you to do, first of all, I'm going to introduce myself in a minute, obviously. But what I'd really like you to do is put in the chat who you are, your name, what organisation you work for. And then what I'd really like you to do is put one thing that you love about major donor fundraising and one thing that you're finding challenging at the moment. And then depending on what questions you've got, if we kind of run out of questions, we can go through and look at the challenges and we can use them as our questions. So by way of introducing yourself, your name, the organisation you work for, this is all in chat, one thing you love about major donor fundraising and one thing you're finding challenging at the moment. And whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to introduce myself. So my name's Jane. I'm an associate consultant with Tree Fundraising. And I specialise in high value giving. So I specialise in major donor fundraising and capital appeals. I've been in the charity sector for over 25 years. I've worked across corporate trusts, major donor fundraising, capital appeals. And then before I went freelance, I was Director of Fundraising and Communications for a regional homelessness charity. I'm also a trustee of the Kent, Surrey and Sussex Air Ambulance, and I'm a qualified coach and Myers-Briggs practitioner. So kind of got lots of things that I do, but today I'm here to talk about major donor fundraising and to answer any questions you've got. What I would say is these sessions can be really helpful. I know from feedback people find them really helpful, and it's most helpful when you help each other out. So it's, although I'm doing most of the talking today, actually when you answer questions and you put things in chat and you support people through chat, that's really valuable because, you know, obviously I don't know everything. I think last time we had a question about a specific database that I'd not ever used. So everyone else was able to help that person out. And then just a reminder, if you could turn your video off while we're doing the session, that will help with the recording. Great. Okay. I'm just going to look back through chat. Let's see. Because there's so many of us, I might not be able to go through all of them, but let's have a look at what you put that you love about major donor fundraising and something that you're finding difficult. So Sultana, I hope that's how you say your name. Exploring major donor fundraising due to the current grant funding climate. You know, your difficulty will be asking people for money. You won't be alone in that. It can also often be people's biggest fear when they start out in major donor fundraising. So if that's helpful, we can talk about that a little bit later on. Hayley is from Tunbridge Wells. She loves building relationships with major donors, matching their love or support for cause with your needs. Great. Yeah, that's brilliant, isn't it, about major donor fundraising? That's what I love most about it as well, actually, is that building a relationship with people and then kind of being a conduit for the change that your major donors want to see. And they've got the means to make that change and the ability, and you're connecting them with what they're really passionate about. Which that's what I love about it, I think. And I'm really curious about people. So I do love that, building the relationships with people. Louise hasn't ever done major donor fundraising. Well, hopefully today will be helpful, Louise, but you like the idea of building genuine relationships and you love talking to people and understanding what makes them tick. Yeah, definitely. Jane is building relationships, challenging making the ask again. Jason likes a detective work. finding people, I'm guessing finding people to support the cause. A small pool of people to ask, not sure how to widen this. Okay. I'm going to make some notes so I don't have to keep going back. I'm just going to quickly write a couple of these things down so that we can come back to them. So kind of, yeah, how do you widen the pool? Where do you find new major donors? Right, I'm going to go through, otherwise it will take me hours to go through all of these, won't it? So I'll just have a quick flick through and we'll come back to some of these later on. Lots of stuff about building relationships, which is great. A lack of CRM, that's an interesting one, isn't it? How do you manage those relationships if you haven't got a CRM? Well, then what I'm going to start with, I think, is maybe bringing up, is maybe talking about where you find new donors. Excuse me if I look a bit vague. It's because I'm trying to multitask. I'm looking at the meeting chat and I'm still letting people in to the room. So that's why I sort of paused then and looked slightly vague. So yeah, should we chat about new donors? Where do you find new donors? How do you find major donors? How do you keep finding new people? So what I would start off saying is that the best place to start, if you're just starting out in major donor fundraising, the best place to start is start with the people that are already supporting you. Hi, Chris. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining. Could I ask that you just pop your video off because it will aid the quality of the recording. And then if you want to ask a question and you want to unmute and put your video back on, that's fine. But just for the purpose of the recording, if you could pop your video off, that would be really helpful. So we're just talking about where do you find new donors. So yeah, it's far easier. It's never easy, but it's far easier to keep people that are already supporting you and to develop the relationship with people that are already supporting you than it is to find new donors and bring them close enough within your relationship to ask them for a gift. So the first place I would start is looking at who has already given. And you can do that by looking back maybe over 3 years, 5 years, who's given. Do have a look at the level of gift, but also look at cumulative giving. So I was working with a client recently, and when they did this exercise, they found some payroll givers that had been giving cumulatively. They'd given over £5,000, but they hadn't yet been picked up in their as indicators as potential major donors because their individual gifts weren't at that kind of £5,000 level. So do have a look at cumulative giving. There are things that you can do internally and externally. So internally, do some analysis of who's giving. Look for indicators or flags on your, even if you haven't got a database, I'll say database, but it could be an Excel spreadsheet, couldn't it? But have a look at some flags. So by that, I mean, have a look at if they've given by check or they've given through a charity account. That could be CAF, that could be one of the private banks like Coots or Hawes. You often need a certain level of income to open an account. So I think Coots is 500,000. I'm not sure if it's 500,000 or 1 million. I think it's 500,000. But if someone is banking through Coots, or they've set up a charity account through CAF, it's an indication that they have a certain level of wealth, but also that they take their philanthropy seriously. So that's one of the flags that you could look up. You can look for titles. You can look for honorary titles. You can look for Sir, Lady, etc. You can look at job descriptions if someone's senior vice president or chief executive or some of those. It's not always obvious, is it? Have a look at postcodes. Are they living in an affluent area? That that those house prices have a certain level. So those are all things that you can look at internally. So that's cumulative giving, indicators of titles, private banking accounts, CAF accounts, that type of thing. You can also well screen your database. So Erica, hello, thank you for joining us. Erica, could I just ask that you turn your video off while we're recording? If you want to ask a question, it's fine to put it on. It just helps with the quality of the recording. Yeah, so you can screen your database, and there are external providers that can do that for you, and that will identify people on your database that have the capacity to give more. So you might have someone on your database that's giving you £20 a month, but actually they have a wealth capacity of 20 million plus and could be giving you a much higher amount, or they're capable of giving a much higher amount. So screening can be really helpful. There are a number of different companies that do that. Factory, Prospecting for Gold, Milestone Research, but also freelance research, prospect researchers can provide that as well. What's really important when you do wealth screening is to think about how there's lots of things. Two main things jump to my mind. The first is that your privacy policy allows you to do wealth screening. If you don't say in your privacy policy that you profile potential donors, so people that either are supporting or people that aren't yet supporting, but you think have the affinity to potentially give a significant gift. If you don't say that you do profiling or carry out research, you're not covered to do external wealth screening because people wouldn't necessarily expect that to be something that you'd be doing. The other thing is kind of the other end. When you get that information back, have a plan and be ready for what you're going to do with it. You can't just hold that information on your database anymore because of GDPR. So, you need to be clear about what you're going to do with that. How are you going to plot out their supporter journey? If there's someone who's giving £10 a month, how are you going to work with them and develop that relationship to bring them to the point where they might be interested in giving a more significant gift? Also, something you can do internally is talk to your trustees. So if you've got a list of potential people that you would like to engage, that's one way that you can ask trustees if they know them. Or you can do something that we call network mapping, contact mapping, communities mapping, whatever you want to call it. But it's working with them to look at the communities and the networks that they're part of and identifying people that might be interested or might share their passion or love for your cause, and working with them to make introductions. So they're kind of internal things that you can do. If you've got some really, really good, close donors that you have a really strong relationship with, major donors, you can also do network mapping with them, and you can talk to them about introducing people within their communities to your charity. So that's all internal. And then external, I would also think about who are the high net worth communities that are in your area. So if you're a regional charity, have you looked at the Lord Lieutenancy office? There's always a Lord Lieutenant for each county, and there's a whole raft of Deputy Lieutenants. And they're people that are invited. They're the sovereign's representatives in the region, in the county. And not always, but often they're people who potentially are either high net worth, or they can be people that are really influential and who you would want out there advocating for your cause and your charity. So
do you
have
watch
a look
Friends?
at those type of things.
How far have you?
Great. People have talked about what companies they've worked with on wealth screening before. What kind of things would you recommend for that journey, or those found on Wealth Screen? Okay, so let's touch on that for a moment. If your wealth screening identifies that you've got lots of people that are maybe giving £2 a month or £5 a month, and yet you find out that they're potentially capable of giving a gift of 20,000 plus, for example, they're a long way from giving that 20,000 gift at the moment, because they're probably sitting within a pool of people that are giving at a low level regularly. Maybe they get your newsletters, depending on the size of your charity. Maybe you have a really sort of sophisticated supporter experience program, and they get key appeals, newsletters, updates, etc., Christmas cards, whatever. but it probably isn't personalised. And the way you want to engage them as a potential major donor is tailored to them, and it will always be personalised to their needs, what motivates them. So it's a case of trying to get to know them, and it's not always easy, because if someone is identifying as a £2 a month donor, you may well be identifying them as a major donor for your cause, but they're not anywhere near that at the moment. Or potentially they're not. You wouldn't know, because you're probably not engaging with them on a one-to-one basis. So first thing, bear in mind, it's going to take time. You're not just suddenly going to identify people through wealth screening, and then suddenly they're going to start giving you these big gifts. So I think managing expectations is really important, and that's for your SMT and your board as well. It can take sort of 2 or 3 years to move someone from giving a £5 a month, being a £5 a month donor, to becoming a sort of long-term strategic partner type donor for your charity. You could start thinking about different events or project visits, engagement type activities that you could start inviting them to. You could, I'm a big fan of phoning people up for discovery calls, because at the moment you don't know anything about them. You don't know what their likes are. You might have very little information on them, if any. So, you could be doing a thankathon. I love a thankathon. Who doesn't love a thankathon? And maybe that involves phoning people up and just thanking them for their gifts. And through having that type of conversation, you can learn a bit more about what motivates them, how they like to be communicated. Would they be interested in coming along to any events? And it's not awkward, because they're not going to say, why are you suddenly phoning me up and giving me all this attention? Because you're doing a thankathon, so you're phoning loads of people up and you just want to say thank you, and because you really appreciate their gift. The other thing you could do is look back at their cumulative giving. So you could send them a thank you card that says, maybe it's a gift anniversary, maybe it's like, did you know you've been giving for 10 years? And during that time, you've donated X amount to us, and this is what we've done with it, and this is the impact it's having, and we really appreciate your support. Because sometimes people that are giving small amounts regularly don't, I don't, if I do that, I don't keep a kind of track of how much that adds up to over the course of 5 or 10 years. So that can be a nice thing to do. Again, you would talk to your trustees, see if they know any of these people. Could they invite them for a coffee? Could they invite them for a chat or a project visit to find out a bit more? What else? Anyone else got any ideas? How have you engaged people that you've identified through wealth screening? How have you engaged them over time to bring them up to a major donor program? Now, the other thing is, if you're a large charity, or not necessarily large, but it's more likely within a medium to larger size charity, if you've got a mid-value program, so there's kind of whatever you might call it, sometimes it's called supporter level program or mass donation program. Your individual giving, there's your people that are giving one-off donations and sort of regular donations, £2, £5, £10 a month. Then often there's a mid-level program, and they might be people, it depends on where your levels are, but they're people that are giving more than the really high volume of people that are giving kind of £5 a month, but they're not giving at your major donor level, which again depends on the level you set. That depends on your charity, but say for this instance £5,000. So you might have some people in the middle, and a mid-level program still does appeals, still does individual giving appeals, and requests for donations, but they're slightly more personalised. They have a different tone to them. They're not one-to-one as they would be in your with your major donors, but neither are they kind of quite as mass volume as your lower level donors. So if you have a mid-level program, that's where I would start with the wealth screen people as well, is think about doing a slightly more personalized appeal to them, bring them into that mid-level program, start to try and engage them, find out more about what motivates them, how do they want to be communicated with, and then you're gradually moving them into your major donor program. Well, that's a good question. Do you think if you told people how much they gave over the years, they might think they've given enough and stop? Oh, I hope not. That would be awful, wouldn't it? I think most people would, personally, I think most people appreciate a thank you and recognition and appreciation of what they've done. And that's in a really low key way of doing it. I don't think it would make people stop. I've not heard of that anyway. Jane, is there a GDPR issue of asking trustees if they know people who donate? There isn't, as long as I said earlier, as long as in your privacy policy you've covered that you do research and analysis of donors, and key is to have something in there that you, I'm paraphrasing, but along the lines of we may also do research to identify people who are not currently giving or not currently supporting the charity, but we think who have an affinity with our cause. You need to have something in there that you're going to, that will cover you for identifying potential people through your trustee networks. Some charities even put in there, so at the air ambulance, we've got something in there about this might include asking trustees and our closest donors to make introductions to people that they know who might share a passion for our cause or something along those lines. So you don't have to go into detail, but that is in there. You do need to have that in there before you can do network mapping. You also need to think very carefully about if someone does give you a name and you do research on that person, the ICO is very clear that on first contact with that person, you have to make your privacy policy available to them. You don't have to tell them that you've well screened them or that you've researched them, but you do need to give them a link to your privacy policy, which will state in your privacy policy that you do those activities. Quite like Hannah's idea there of a theme day for an environmental charity, sending a short personalised email to celebrate Earth Day. Yeah, these are really nice things to do, aren't they? Making good use of Everyman Cinema in our city, bringing prospects together. You had a film related to homelessness. Yeah, brilliant. You know, just there are so many ways you can engage people, and there are so many ways you can engage people, and just be as creative as you possibly can be, and think about your cause. Like, what is it that really works and aligns with your values and your cause? I used to work for Children's Hospice, and the children used to do a lot of messy play and hand painting, and often we used to, with their parents' permission, that we would use those hand paintings as part of our thank you card. Maybe we'd make a thank you card and produce just a handful of thank you cards for key donors. I know, and I did some work with an animal charity, and they had their corporate fundraiser used to make little crocheted donkeys and horses, and sometimes they'd send them with a thank you card just to say, you know, thanks so much for the support that you're doing, and their donors loved it. They were these really cute little crocheted animals. Sending a postcard with a picture from your organisation, follow up with a call. And you know, with GDPR, you don't have to. A lot of charities only will call people if they have direct consent for it. You don't have to have consent to call people. You do have to check that they're not on the telephone preference service, and you do have to check that they haven't specifically said they don't want to be called, but you don't have to have consent to phone people. That's a common misconception with people that I speak to. Is it enough, Jodie? Is it enough to add the link to our privacy policy in an initial email if that's how you choose to contact them? Yes, it is. So, you know, if it's a trustee making an introduction, it's fairly easy, isn't it? Because they might make the introduction verbally or by email. You might follow that up and you might just say, by the way, here's a link to our privacy policy. It doesn't have to be a big concern. There's lots of different ways you can do it, and take a layered approach. You might also have something in your email signature that says we've updated our privacy policy, take a look. So you're covering it in lots of different ways. Do you check the telephone preference service online? Yes, I believe you do. I think it is online that you check it. Okay. So I think that's probably covered quite a lot of where you find major donors. Externally, doing things like looking at high net worth communities, looking at in Kent, actually, we've got this group of people called Kent ambassadors. I know they're not in every county, but we've got and again, you have to be invited, and it's people that have given significant service to the county of Kent. And they go out on project visits. And it's brilliant if you can get a project visit. It's this whole network of people that are decision makers, influential people in the county of Kent that are passionate about Kent as well. And, you know, they go out, they came out to the air ambulance recently. And it was a brilliant project visit, and it's a really brilliant chance to engage people. And they're people that should know about what local charities are doing, and they're people you would want to engage. They're people you'd want to be out there advocating on your behalf. So it's worth, you know, what are the groups and communities that are specific to you? I know this is only if you're a regional charity. I appreciate it's not if you're national. But who are the groups and communities that are local to you, that where they're people that should know about your charity and what you're doing and can advocate on your behalf? And actually, even if you're a national charity, if you have projects in local areas, then again, that's worth something to be looking into. Oh, one of the challenges, what's this, Hannah? You've got one of the challenges is the expectations of quick gifts, and that major gifts will instantly solve funding gaps. Yeah, that's common, isn't it? And I imagine at the moment that might be even more the case given how difficult the trust funding environment is. So what can you do about that? Partly that's a sort of awareness raising and education thing, isn't it? Not just for your board and your SMT, that's really important. That building their understanding of what philanthropy fundraising is and why it takes so long. Maybe using some stories, some case studies of a relationship that has taken time to develop and all the intricacies within that. Plot it out maybe for your board or for your SMT. But it's not just at that level, is it? It's also often it's about increasing people's understanding of major donor fundraising at kind of operations level as well, particularly if you're asking for a lot of impact measurement or a lot of information about projects from project staff. Why don't you go on a bit of a roadshow around the organisation about philanthropy and what it is? You know, why do people give big gifts? What are they looking for? Why does it take so long? You know, it takes so long because you've got to build a relationship with them, and relationships don't happen overnight. They've got to trust that you're the right organisation for this significant commitment they're going to make. So they've got to trust that you can make the impact they want to see. They've got to trust that you can manage a gift of that size. They've got to take time to get to know the people involved so that they trust the people at the organisation. That could be chief executive, could be trustees, but it can also be operations staff. You've got to build that kind of connection, haven't you, between their mind and their emotions. So there's going to be lots of engagement. There's going to be lots of potential project visits, interaction with either the people or the thing that you benefit, and the people that do the work. Also, one thing I always say about major donor fundraising is that internally as fundraisers and as organisations, we have targets, don't we? And we might need or we might want to secure X amount of money by a particular date. But major donors, philanthropists are going to give to their own timescales. You know, they may be driven, if it's the real sense of urgency, they may be driven by your timescales, but generally they're driven by their own timescales, and they will give when it's right for them. And that doesn't necessarily match when your trustees or your SMT want that gift to come in. So I think that's really helpful to help people to understand. an example of that could be, I don't know, maybe they've got this, maybe you've done your wealth screening, you've identified someone that has this wealth capacity, but actually when you've done a bit more research, you know that they have one or more children at, I don't know, at private school or at university that they're helping out. They might have an elderly parent in a care home that they're helping out. They might have an enormous mortgage. On paper, they might look like they've got this huge capacity to give, but actually in reality now might not be the time at the point at which they've got that disposable income. So these are all really important things to get across to build that kind of culture of philanthropy, that understanding of how it works. Because I think when people understand it, it makes more sense, and that push to fill a short-term funding gap diminishes. And yeah, I would use storytelling, give an example of, I don't know, I'm sure you've all got them, relationships that took 2 or 3 years to develop, and you had lots of different engagement points with those people, lots of questions they came up with, maybe some challenges, and over time you answered those questions, they became closer to the charity, maybe they started with a smaller gift and have increased that. So give them a story of where it's worked successfully, but it has taken time. Gosh, what's the best way to form a target from nothing? That's a really quite hard question, Holly. Okay, so you're a trust fundraising consultant, recently done a major donor course, and a small client, income of 450,000, wants you to set up a framework for a major donor program for their 10-year anniversary, aiming for an income target in 2026. Do you think 4 days a month this year could yield 6-figure income next year? I think at the moment it's impossible to answer that question because it wouldn't be evidence-based. So what I would do is do lots of analysis of their database. There's all sorts of questions that come up, don't they? Like, what do they count as a major donor is the first thing. What level of income are they counting as a major donor? Who is currently giving at that level or near that level? How many prospects are there that can give at the level that's required? What is the target? What do they think they need? Why do they need that? Like, is there a strategic need, or is this just it's an anniversary and so they've decided that we should get X amount from major donors? Because there has to be a need and there has to be an urgency, and why now? So what's the need? What are you actually going to go to those major donors with? What's your case for support? What's your ask? How will that money be used? How will you measure impact? Do they have the resources to look after major donors? Because it takes time, it takes resources. As the chief exec and the senior management team and the trustees, are they willing to get involved? Do they understand that it needs a commitment from them, and people will want to talk to them and want to engage with them? I think if you're starting from scratch, you might get people that give in 2026, but equally you might not. It's just as likely that you won't get people if you haven't got any connections at the moment. It's likely to take longer. 4 days a month, yeah. I think until you've done that and you know what you're looking to raise and how many prospects you've currently got and at what levels you would need them to give in order to raise that target, I think it would be really hard to say whether that's achievable in the time that you've got at the moment. I hope that helped. I'm trying to find something that's a bit different from what we've talked about already. Well, Sophie, you've just posted one, haven't you? Do I have any experience of working with donor advisory funds? I'm seeing quite a few these days. I'm trying to understand their role or influence in the philanthropy space. I have to be honest, I haven't got a huge amount of experience of working on donor advisory funds. So I'm going to open that up to the group and see if anyone's got more recent experience than me that can really, help Sophie out there. Any ideas? And I'm just thinking about what I do know about donor advised funds or how you can engage people. So often they're given, aren't they, through things like through CAF or through things like that you're if you're local regional community foundation. So in Kent, we've got the Kent Community Foundation, and there's lots of donor advised funds. And it can feel sometimes quite hard to get to those people because they set it up through the intermediary. And often they have a very clear application process for that. One thing that's I think is always a really good idea is if say you are, let's focus on community foundations for a moment. If you are hoping to engage people through the community foundation, go to their events where they often do have donors. So if they're doing presentations or they're doing some sort of event or a celebration of how much has been raised by the community foundation over the last X amount of time, do go along to that because you'll have a chance to meet people directly. It's always worth building a relationship with the staff at the community foundation. So have a chat with the chief executive and the grant managers. Often they have a philanthropy advisor who is directly advising wealth managers as well as individual philanthropists on how best to set up their fund. So, build a relationship with that person so that you're in their mind as they're talking to people. I'm going to, what's the time? Got 15 minutes left. It's gone really quickly. Would it be helpful to just touch on, because it came up in the challenges a bit, would it be helpful to just talk about making an ask? I mean, that's a whole, monetary fundraising, do like half a day training on making the ask. So it's a big subject, but if it would be helpful, I'm happy to just touch on it now. Okay, we'll do that. I've just got one more thing to say about donor advised funds, and it's slightly different. It's not donor advisory funds, but something I have done before is engaged wealth managers. So, the big banks all have wealth managers that work with high net worth people. And we've done events before. So quite often Barclays, I know, for this group of investors and customers, take them on kind of money can't buy type visits. I can't think of anything particular at the moment because I'm trying to think on the spot. But I was working with the National Park Foundation. So one of their major donors was a client of the bank and used to go out on these, maybe they get a behind the scenes visit to a vineyard or something like that. But they also do charity visits as part of that. So I worked with the National Park Foundation and they did something which was completely different to what these people normally do, but they got them in for a morning and they had a behind the scenes visit to the national park with one of the rangers, and they helped plant some trees and they loved it. And it was a great way of the people at the foundation being able to talk directly to the people, whereas the wealth managers would say there's no way they would let you contact them individually. They're quite protective of their client base, but actually it was just a great way to start having conversations and get to know people individually. Right, making the ask. Let's move on to that. It isn't unusual for fundraisers starting out in major donor fundraising to feel fearful about making the ask. It's not very British, is it? We feel a bit uncomfortable. Lots of people say, major donor fundraising, to ask people for lots of money. Ooh, it's all a bit like, So I think the best thing you can do is take the fear out of it. Yeah. So there are some things you can do to do that. You can do training. You can follow people that, experts that do this and maybe do webinars or workshops, things like that. Fundamentally, the ask comes at the end of a very long relationship building. So part of the fear is involved in if you just jump straight in and you ask someone for a significant gift without bothering to get to know them and to build a relationship with them, they're likely to say no. But what you've done over that course of time is built a one-to-one relationship with them, personalized. You've engaged them across lots of different things, maybe events, maybe project visits, maybe through phone calls. You've got to know them, you've got to know their motivations, you've got to know what drives them, you've got to know what they love about your cause, what made them give their gift in the first place, what matters to them when they're deciding who to give to or deciding to make a big gift. What's important to them? What do they consider? What do they want back from the charity? What do they need to know? Who do they need to speak to? How do they want to be recognised, if at all? And you're gathering all of this information at every point that you're engaging with them. Yeah, so you're building a really good picture and you're building a really good relationship with them. Hello, Kate. Thank you for joining us. We've only got 10 minutes left, so we're just going through kind of making the ask at the moment, just briefly, because that's a really big topic, but just kind of key things around making the ask that can take the fear out of it. Kate, could I ask that you turn your video off just so the recording is high enough quality? Thank you. So there's a kind of checklist that you can go through in your head. Yeah. So it's like, do you know what part of your work they're most interested in and most likely to fund? Yes, tick. Okay, that's one thing you need to know. Do you know at what level they're likely to give? Now, you might know that because you've done wealth screening and you know their capacity. That's just one part of it. Through the conversations you've had, they may have shared with you other charities that they support or a general level that they generally support, or you might have found that information out from publicly available information that you know that they've made a gift of 10,000 to a similar charity. So you've got to know the right part of the project that they want to give to. You've got to know the right amount that you're going to be asking to. If you don't know how much you should ask for, there's nothing wrong with asking for a range. If you really can't work out, but it's also based on need, isn't it? So, you know, it's about what do you need to make this thing happen or to make the change that you need to make. So, right part of the project, the right amount, the right time. Do you remember earlier I was saying about, you know, if people have got loads of financial commitments, or maybe they own their own business and things are a bit shaky at the moment, it might not be the right time. So I once worked on a capital appeal during the 2008 financial banking crisis. We got, you know, it was a brilliantly planned capital appeal. Everything was going really well. Then everything went wrong with the banking crisis, and we were getting a lot of feedback as it's just not the right time to ask. So we just kept building those relationships. We kept involving people, and we kind of rode it out, and they did give, but they didn't necessarily give at the time when we initially would have liked them to. So right time. Have you got the right people in the room? So who are the people that they most engage with in your organization? But also think about who do they need in the room? If you're having an ask meeting with them, who do they need in that room? So I've had major donors before that have brought their mothers round on a project visit because their opinion was really important to them. So that would be an indication that maybe you should invite their mother and them if you're going to have a meeting with them to ask. You know, these are kind of tick lists. There's more, but these are kind of what I talk about when I kind of think, actually, can I answer all of these questions? Have I answered all their challenges? You know, have they got questions and challenges, and have we answered them properly as an organization? Are they satisfied? And that's the kind of checklist I run through. And if I can answer all of that, then it's the right time to ask. If I don't know that, it's probably not the right time to ask. So that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, doesn't it? Is how can you make your senior management or your trustees understand why it takes so long? Because these are all really important things that you have to know, and it takes time to gather that information. It takes time for them to feel comfortable in sharing some of that information with you. The biggest thing I can say about asking in the short time we've got is shift it from asking for money, and shift your mindset into that if you have developed a relationship properly with someone and they're fully engaged and really motivated and you can make the change that they want to see, then asking is just the next stage of that relationship. Philanthropists know they're going to be asked for a gift at some point. You know, they're not, you know, especially if they're a serial philanthropist, they know that at some point you're going to ask them for a gift. You're going to ask them to make a financial commitment, and they're expecting you to do it as well. So that takes the fear out of it too. You know, but actually, if you can shift that mindset, that can be really helpful. That helped me when I was just starting out. Is oh my God, I've got to ask them for this enormous amount of money, in my mind, an enormous amount of money. Actually, now is the right time. It feels like the right time in our relationship, and it's just the next stage. And don't forget that they want to make the change. They're passionate about what you're doing. They want to help you. They want the charity to be sustainable. They want the difference. They want the change to happen. They want that transformation. So you're offering them the opportunity to make the change they want to see. That's the mindset I would say you need to get into, rather than I've got to ask them for money. And also bear in mind that what you might think of as an extraordinary amount of money might not be an extraordinary amount of money for them. Right. I'm just going to have a quick look through the chat before we finish. There's so many questions I didn't get to. I'm so sorry if you've had a question, you've been waiting for me to get to it, and I haven't answered it. What I would say is that, so on Facebook, Money Tree Fundraising run both the Trust Fundraising Hub and the Major Donor Facebook community, and they're brilliant. So if we haven't got your questions, do ask them on that community. It can be really helpful responses. We're going to run another one of these on the 11th of April, 12 till 1. So I think you can submit your questions to Money Tree Fundraising beforehand, and they're the ones that I would go through first. So if you've got a burning question I haven't answered, do submit your questions. Connect with each other on LinkedIn. So important, that collaboration, that sounding board, that checking things out with people. People are extraordinarily generous with their time and thinking, and so do connect with each other on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me, or if you want to, you can send me a message and ask me any questions on there. Oh, there's a lot on the chat, isn't there, about the donor advised funds. There's some really good ideas on there. So before you go, do have a quick look through there and see if what people have come up with and ideas that they've come up with. Thank you for the comments. It's been really helpful. I hope it has. I feel like I have talked an enormous amount. Maybe next time some of you should do some more talking. But it's been great. Thank you for all your input and all your questions. The chat has been on fire, and I hope it's been helpful. Fundraising is tough at the moment. I just want to finish by saying you are doing a brilliant job. Stick in there, and use your communities to build your resilience, and rely on each other, because it's really important, I think, particularly at the moment. Thank you so much for joining us. The next session on Major Donor Fundraising is the 11th of April. It's me again. Do have a look at those Facebook communities. And as I say, this will be on Money Tree Fundraising's YouTube channel over the next few days. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Really nice to meet you. Thanks again for all your input. Bye-bye.